In a medieval village, marriage did not begin with love. It was a contract, an exchange between families, land for land, cows for cows, a daughter for a son. You, the one involved, simply followed the arrangement. And the wedding night? It was not a night of dreams, but a task, weighing as heavily as the rest of your life that followed. You stand before the house. The wooden door is low, the iron latch cold. The hem of your dress is stained with dried mud. The air is thick with the smell of kitchen smoke, animal fat, and damp wool. From a distance, the scattered laughter of drunk men can still be heard from the village common. The feast ended late. Diluted beer still clings to a few lips. Night is falling. The bamboo torches on the road burn weakly, their smoke stinging the eyes. Dew gathers on the thatched roof, dripping down drop by drop. The wooden walls are damp. In the barn, a cow lows once, then falls silent. The forage is out. The mill stands still. Only the sound of a chicken shifting restlessly on a beam remains. You push the door. The hinge creaks. The room is small, the ceiling low, the floor of packed earth. In the corner, a cracked wooden chest is covered with a coarse cloth. The bed is a wooden frame with woven rope and a straw mattress. The woolen blanket is thick and frayed. On the table, a tallow candle burns, its wick black, emitting an unpleasant, acrid smell. You sit on the edge of the bed. The straw rustles. Your back aches after a day of bowing, listening to instructions, and standing for long hours. Your stomach is empty from a feast of dry bread and pork fat, hard to swallow. Your throat is parched from the weak beer. Your eyes sting from the torch smoke. Marriage here is an agreement, not a vow. The church ceremony is done. The iron ring on your finger, your name joined to another family's. Tonight is what remains. Not for love, but for custom. The air in the room is heavy with the scent of damp wood, old straw, and sweat lingering in the wool. A linen dress hangs on the wall. In the corner, a wooden basin for a quick wash holds water still cloudy with ash. Footsteps pass outside. Someone coughs dryly. A dog barks briefly, then falls silent. In the village, private matters are never truly private. News spreads faster than the wind. Tomorrow morning, there will be sideways glances, whispered words. You know this. It is not strange. You look at your hands. The skin is rough, cracked, accustomed to washing and spinning thread. Tomorrow, it will be the same. The only difference is that you will work under a different roof, by a different hearth. You exhale. The candle drips, its shadow flickering. There are no flowers, no music, only the bed, the blanket, the responsibility. You pull at the blanket. The fabric is coarse, heavy. The straw beneath the mattress is lumpy. Not comfortable, but warmer than the earthen floor. You lie back. The ceiling is blackened by years of kitchen smoke. Your eyes open, then close. You think of the immediate future. Tomorrow morning, start the fire, boil the water, knead the dough. Nothing further. The chapel bell from this afternoon is silent. Only your own heartbeat remains. Steady, clear. You close your eyes. Not to dream, to rest, to save your strength. The wedding night, for you, is just one step. Close the door, light the candle, lie down, be silent. You pull the blanket up to your chest. One more long breath. It is enough. Outside the door, the village is cooling down after a noisy day. The feast is over. Only scattered traces remain. In the common yard, the bonfire has collapsed into red embers buried in a layer of gray ash. A few half-burnt logs lie crossed over each other, smoke coiling close to the ground. Wooden benches are overturned, the long table sticky with grease. Wooden bowls are left behind, with cloudy, fatty liquid inside. The smell of cold grease clings to your hair, your sleeves, sticking fast, refusing to fade. The last person to leave the feast stumbles home. They step through a puddle of mud, their shoes sinking deep, a squelch, squelch sound with every step. One person lets out a dry, beer-hoarsened laugh, then falls silent. A door closes somewhere with a creak. A dog barks sharply, then it too is quiet. The village sinks into a thick, heavy silence, broken only by small sounds. A cough, a spoon dropping, a shutter banging in the wind. The main road in the village is packed earth mixed with gravel. Spilled feast water, mixed with the afternoon rain, flows in a small stream down the ditch. A wooden plank bridges the ditch. The plank is warped, darkened, its surface slick from years of being walked upon. Fresh mud stains it, spreading to the edges. You step carefully, skirt hiked high, eyes looking down, one hand holding the fabric of your dress. No one walks beside you. In the center of the village square is the well. It is built of stacked stone blocks, its rim worn into hollows. The wooden bucket lies tilted, the rope sopping wet. Around the well, water stains spread out, imprinted with footprints large and small. Green moss grows on the rim, slippery. The air around the well is damp, smelling of old water. You remember this afternoon? People drawing water continuously to wash bowls, pots, and to rinse the ground. Now, only the rope hangs down, wet and heavy. Houses are built close together. Dark wood, thatched roofs tied with hemp rope. Small doors, windows the size of a hand. A few houses still have oil lamps lit, yellow light seeping through the cracks in the planks. Inside, you can hear quiet voices. The clink of a spoon against a bowl, a child's intermittent cry, a wife's soothing words. From another house, you hear a man grumbling, a hand slamming on a table. The sound dies quickly, replaced by a thick silence. You walk past the forge. Ash covers the ground. The bellows stand still. A hammer lies diagonally across the anvil. The hammer's wooden handle is smooth and polished, clearly worn where hands have gripped it. The smell of burnt iron still lingers in the air. On the wall hang a few rough iron bars, the weak candlelight casting long, winding shadows upon them. Further on is the mill. The millstone is still, the sails motionless. During the day, it creaks and turns, white flour dust flying in a cloud. At the base of the mill, the ground is covered with a thin layer of flour. Anyone who passes leaves faint white footprints. Now, it is silent. Only the wind whistling through the cracks in the planks, like a long sigh. You stop before the chapel. Stone walls, a dark tiled roof, the wooden door shut tight. It is silent inside. No more singing, no more prayers. The steps are cold, the stone worn into hollows from years of kneeling. You knelt there this afternoon. Your knees ached, your back was tired, your eyes throbbed from the candlelight. Now, only the gray-black stone walls remain, standing silent under the dim moon. You look for a moment, then turn away. On a nearby fence hang a few pieces of salted meat. White salt has formed streaks, giving off a strong smell. The wind sways them, the rope creaks, the meat dangles. The pigsty next to it smells of damp straw, the heavy odor hitting your nose. A pig turns, snorts, its hooves scraping the ground. On the other side is the chicken coop, the door securely latched. The chickens are quiet, only the soft sound of wings rustling. People fear losing a chicken more than a coat. because a chicken can still lay eggs. You reach the village crossroads. One path leads to the fields, dark and empty, with only wind and grass. The other leads deeper into the village, where the roofs huddle together, smoke still rising from a few chimneys. You stand still, listening. You hear the distant clatter of wooden shoes, the sound of someone pulling a crude cart, its wooden wheels grinding on the gravel. Then silence. No one is laughing anymore. No one is singing. No lute, no drum. During the day, the village is noisy. Tonight, it feels as though all the air has been sucked out of it. Only a heaviness hangs in the atmosphere. You can feel the invisible gaze of the entire village, even though no one is outside now. They have closed their doors, latched their bolts, but tomorrow, everyone will know how you are, what happened tonight. The old sweat from the church ceremony still clings to your clothes. The iron ring on your finger is cold, bulky, hard, out of place. You turn it slightly. The metal bites into your skin. That feeling is not easily forgotten. From now on, you no longer belong to your parents' house. From now on, you are tied to another roof, another hearth, another land. In the distance, a wolf howls. Short, hoarse, echoing from the fields, the village dogs stir, barking sporadically. After a moment, they fall silent. But that howl hangs in your mind, like a reminder. Beyond the village, beyond the roofs, is a darkness full of fangs. You turn back, returning to your new home. Your steps are heavy. Your skirt brushes against dust, against the earth. No one sees you off. No one follows. The door closes behind you, its rusty hinge creaking. Inside, it is dark, the candle flickering. The straw bed lies there, waiting. Your wedding night begins like this. A silent village, an old house, a hard bed, a long sigh. No songs, no flowers, only responsibility. The door closes behind you, the hinge creaking softly like a sigh. The space is completely different from outside. In the village, the wind blew, leaves rustled, dogs barked, and in the distance, a wolf's howl echoed. But here, within these four wooden walls, everything stops. There is only the crackling sound of the candle and the smell of burning tallow lingering in the air. The house is small, the wooden walls made from split logs, the gaps filled with a mixture of mud and straw. In winter, the wind still finds its way through every crack, blowing straight onto your skin. The thatched roof is thick, dark, and sagging in places, revealing dry branches. The candlelight casts shadows on it, turning the broken branches into jagged shapes. The floor is packed earth, soft in damp spots, hard where many feet have trod. Dried footprints are still visible. There are fresh mud stains from the feast, spreading to the corner of the bed. There sits an old wooden chest, its lid warped, its hinges rusty. On the chest lies a coarse woolen cloth, gray, rough to the touch. The bed is against the wall. The frame is oak, with posts driven into the floor and tied tightly with hemp rope. The mattress is stuffed with straw. The straw is hard, lumpy, with sharp thorns mixed in, which you can feel clearly as you sit down. The blanket is a thick piece of wool, patched in many places, its fibers matted into clumps. There are no pillows, only a roll of old fabric to rest your head on. A small table is placed next to the bed. On it, a tallow candle sits in a cracked earthenware dish. The light is a dim yellow, casting flickering shadows on the wall. Next to the candle is an overturned wooden bowl, probably to keep mice away. The tabletop is covered with crisscrossing scratches from a chopping knife. You can see clearly that this table is used for cutting bread and meat, not for decoration. In the corner of the house is the hearth. It is built of clay, with a pit of black coals. Old ash fills it, not yet cleaned out. A few half-burnt logs are tossed beside it. The smell of old smoke is strong, mixed with the smells of grease and straw, creating a thick concoction that clings to your nostrils. On the rack above the hearth hang a few pieces of dried meat, the fat congealed into a layer of cloudy white. You walk slowly around the house. Each step makes a small creaking sound on the dry earth floor. A few tools hang on the wall: a dull iron sickle, a wooden mallet, a bamboo basket. All are discolored, polished smooth from years of use. Nothing is new. Everything is old, tied to sweat, to hands, to a rhythm of life that has been repeated for too long. You touch your own hand. The skin is rough. The spaces under your nails still hold dust and grease from the afternoon's feast. The iron ring on your finger is cold, like a piece of metal stuck in your flesh. You turn it slightly. It presses in, leaving a red mark. The only gift of this marriage, if it can be called a gift, is this cheap iron circle. In the rafters, mice scurry. The sound of tiny feet pattering, then the sound of teeth gnawing on dry branches. You look up. The candlelight flickers, casting long streaks that enlarge the mice's shadows on the ceiling, like black specters running wild. You remain silent, listening, then let it go. There are mice everywhere. It is not strange. You open the chest. Inside are a few pieces of cloth, a woolen shirt, an old dress, and a musty smell rises up. The fabric is thick, but heavy and rough to the touch. You fold it and put it back. This is not yours. It belongs to this house. You are just the newcomer, here to wear what is given, not to choose. You go closer to the hearth, touching a piece of wood. Ash sticks to your hand, black and powdery. You try to brush it off, but the more you rub, the more it spreads. The smell is pervasive, clinging. You pour a little water from a nearby wooden barrel. The water is cloudy, with bits of straw floating in it. You bring it to your lips and take a sip. It tastes musty, brackish, not clean. But you are thirsty, so you drink it. Your throat feels less dry, but a heavy taste lingers on your tongue. There are footsteps outside the door. Someone passes by without stopping. The clatter of wooden shoes, clop, clop, fades into the distance. A dog barks, then silence. You know the whole village will wake up early tomorrow. There will be stares. There will be questions. There will be words that are half joking, half serious. And you will have to stand still, force a smile, and respond. Tonight is just the first step towards days like that. You return to the bed. The candle is burned down, the tallow dripping, the smoke acrid. You try to adjust the wick, but it breaks. The light slants, dimmer now. The room gradually sinks into darkness. You lie down. The straw rustles beneath your back. A thorn pokes your shoulder. You turn over. Another thorn pokes your hip. You turn again. Finally, you sigh and lie still, letting your body get used to it. The woolen blanket is heavy, smelling of old sweat and dampness, but it still holds some warmth when you pull it up. You hug it close and close your eyes. You can still hear the mice running, the wind seeping through the cracks in the wall, the small crackle of the candle. These sounds blend together, steady, repetitive, like a slow heartbeat. In the darkness, you realize this is your new home, not luxurious, not comfortable, but it is where you will live, not by choice, but by necessity. Tomorrow you will wake up, start the fire, fetch water, wash the baskets. No more parents calling your name. No more familiarity. Everything is different now, yet also familiar, because it is the same everywhere. Wood, straw, earth, smoke. You pull the blanket higher. You let out a long breath. The ceiling is dim, stained by years of smoke, cracked, and water damaged. You look at it, then your eyes close. Not to dream, just to wait. Wait for morning. Your wedding night in this new house is just this: a straw bed, a tallow candle, 4 wooden walls, and your own breath. In a medieval village, the wedding night was not just a private matter for 2 people. It was a community affair. Not everyone watched directly, but everyone knew, discussed, and paid attention. The next morning, whispers would spread through the market, the fields, and the church. You lie on the straw bed, a thick woolen blanket covering you, the darkness thick and heavy. But you know that out there are still ears waiting to hear. In the small house, the 4 wooden walls cannot contain sound. In the village, every wall is thin. Every roof has gaps. If the wind can get in, so can people's words. In many places, a custom was maintained. Family and relatives would escort the couple to their bed. Some villages required the parents to wait outside the door. In others, friends would follow, laughing and shouting, leaving no room for silence. It was believed that this witnessing made the marriage official. You remember the afternoon. As the feast was ending, a few village elders advised, "Tonight, remember to do your duty. Tomorrow, remember to hang out the sheet." The words were light, but their eyes were heavy. Everyone understood. The bedsheet, the cloth, would be the proof, not just of one night, but of the family's honor. In many villages, the next morning, the sheet would be brought out, held high, and displayed for the neighborhood to see. People would look for the mark, stare, and whisper. If it was there, the family would be proud. If not, it would be a scandal. Rumors spread faster than fire, and once they started, they were hard to extinguish. You turn to face the wall. The wooden wall is cracked, the gaps as black as ink stains. You imagine eyes peering through. In reality, no one is peeking. But the pressure makes you feel watched. The ring on your hand is cold, a reminder that you have moved to another house, your name tied to another's, impossible to remove. The tallow candle has gone out. The room is dark, with only the dim glow of old embers in the hearth. A light, musty smoke still hangs in the air. You can hear your own breathing clearly, the sound of straw rubbing together beneath your back. Every small sound echoes loudly, amplified by the night's silence, reverberating in your chest. Outside, the villagers are sleeping, but not soundly. They are accustomed to listening. Every sound could become a story. Every silence could be interpreted. You understand that you are not just living for yourself, but also in the eyes and ears of others. The ritual on the bed, for many, was not romantic at all. It was the final part of the contract. The parents had shaken hands. The church had given its blessing. The feast was over. Now it was your turn to complete the rest. If you didn't, the contract would be considered incomplete. You remember an old story, heard from your grandmother. A girl in a nearby village had no proof on her wedding night. The next day, the whole village whispered. Her husband's family looked down on her. Her husband grew distant. A few years later, she was sent back to her parents' house. No one wanted to bear the shame. That story was still told, over and over, as a warning to all girls about to enter the threshold of marriage. You grip the edge of the blanket. Your nails dig into the coarse wool, catching on the fibers, stinging. Your stomach churns from both hunger and anxiety. Your body is restless, but your mind is so alert it's exhausting. Each heartbeat is like a drum, reminding you of your duty, of the village's watchful eyes. Outside, the wind blows. The thatched roof rustles. Mice scurry. An owl hoots a long, distant call. You close your eyes. You dare not think far ahead. You only think of tomorrow morning, of the sheet that will be hung out, of the jokes, of the prying eyes. No one could escape it. In the village, privacy did not exist. Even the bed, which should have been a private place, became part of the community. People intruded upon it with customs, with demands, with surveillance. Tonight, you realize more clearly than ever, your marriage does not belong to you. It belongs to the village. You sigh, the blanket heavy on your chest. The dampness, the smell of wool, of straw, of smoke, all merge into one, thicken your throat. You try to breathe slowly, so as not to cough. Your eyes are closed, but your mind does not rest. A wedding night in this era, in this world, was like this. A bed not just for sleeping, but for proving. A sheet not just for covering, but for evidence. A night not just for two people, but for the whole village, the whole clan. You lie still, listening to your own heartbeat, beat by beat, like a watchman's drum. Time passes slowly, heavily. No one is counting the hours, but everyone knows morning will come. And then, this fragile privacy will become a public affair. You pull the blanket up to your neck. Your eyes are open in the darkness. The straw bed rustles. There are no dreams, no illusions, only one truth. You are in a ritual, whether you want to be or not. And this ritual does not need you to believe, only to endure. The crowing of a rooster wakes you before your eyes open. One crow, then two, then a flurry. Outside the door, an ox cart rumbles by, its wooden wheels grinding on the gravel. The early morning wind slips through a crack in the wall, a cold draft on the back of your neck. The tallow candle has burned out, its black wick collapsed, a streak of congealed white fat left on the earthenware dish. The smell of old smoke still lingers, musty. You push yourself up with your hands. The straw rustles under the mattress. Your back is stiff, your shoulders heavy. The woolen blanket slides off, letting the morning chill seep into the collar of your undergarment. On the ceiling, the smoke has formed a black band, the cracks spreading out like the dry roots of a tree. You smooth back a stray strand of sweaty hair and straighten your dress. The iron ring on your finger is still cold, startling you when you touch it. The sound of the rooster in the yard turns into the scratching of chicken feet on the damp earth. In the sty, a pig snorts, its snout pressing against the wooden latch. A cow lows a short breath, its chain clinking. In the hearth, the ashes are cold. You reach for a piece of kindling, touching the old coals, black powder sticking to your fingertips. You blow. A thin cloud of ash flies up, smelling faintly burnt. You arrange the kindling, blow again, and the fire catches slowly, then bursts into a small flame. The first warmth of the day. The door creaks. Your mother-in-law enters. She does not knock. She carries a small wooden bucket, water still clinging to its rim. Her eyes scan the room, the hearth, the table, the bed, the blanket. Her gaze doesn't linger anywhere for long, but it misses nothing. She sets the bucket down and says quietly, her voice dry, "Get up early, start the fire. The well water is cold. Make barley porridge for the family." You nod. She asks nothing more. But before turning away, she glances at the rolled-up bedsheet at the edge of the bed. Wordless. She leaves, the clatter of her wooden shoes echoing on the packed earth floor. You pull the blanket, fold it, and place it neatly at the head of the bed. The woolen fabric is thick, heavy, smelling of old sweat. You rest your hand on it for a moment, then pull back. Outside, the sound of footsteps and low voices grows. The house is fully awake. You pour water into the black iron pot, hang it on the iron hook above the hearth. Hearing the metallic scrape, you crumble a pinch of salt, drop it in, and wait for the water to boil. Your husband appears at the doorway. His eyes are still red, his jaw dusted with a white powder from who knows when. He looks at the hearth, then at you, and nods slightly, as if in greeting. No questions, no words. He takes a bundle of firewood out to the yard and splits a few more logs. The sound of the axe hitting the wood, heavy and steady. A few times, he glances inside, as if to make sure the fire is going. You poke the coals, hearing the first bubbles of boiling. Steam fogs up the wall just above the hearth. Morning comes quickly in the village. A few minutes later, voices are calling to each other at the well. "Water here. Let me have the rope." The women arrive early, skirts tucked up, hands holding buckets, shoulders wrapped in shawls. They pull the bucket, water splashing into their containers with a heavy thump. Their greetings are mixed with probing questions. "Tired last night? Did you sleep well? It will probably be sunny today." The words are ordinary. The tone is ordinary. But the eyes are not entirely ordinary. When you carry your bucket to the well, they look at your iron ring, at your face, at the way you walk. No one asks directly, but every question has a subtext. You bend down to pull the bucket. The water-soaked rope is heavy, scraping against the wet stone rim. Water spills from the bucket, splashing onto your wrist, cold and sharp. You pour it into your bucket, lift it, your shoulder straining. A woman standing beside you, tying her shawl, glances over. It's no surprise. The morning after is always busy. You give a faint smile. No reply. Your bucket full, you head back. Behind you, whispers follow, so quiet that even the morning wind can hear them. Back at the house, you pour water into the pot, add the threshed barley, and stir. The wooden spoon clatters against the rim of the pot. The morning mist in the yard has condensed into droplets on the edge of the roof, dripping onto the threshold with a plink-plink. Inside the house, the smell of porridge slowly rises, nutty and warm. You tear a piece of dry bread from yesterday, soak it in the first bowl of porridge to soften it for the elderly. Your mother-in-law comes in, takes the bowl, blows on it, tastes it, and gives a short nod. It's good. Add more salt to the big pot. You do as you're told. In the kitchen, everything has its order. Large bowls for the men going to the fields, medium bowls for the women doing housework, small bowls for the children. The wooden ladle is passed from hand to hand. No family is more luxurious than another in its seasoning. The only difference is who wakes up earlier, who starts the fire faster, who keeps the fire burning steadily. You understand this rule, learned from your mother's house, now practiced in another's. Outside, the mill begins to creak. The The wind picks up a little, the sails turn, and a fine white dust settles on the ground. The old miller coughs and pulls the shield, the sound of wood scraping against wood. Men in the yard call to each other as they carry sacks. Names are called out loudly, including yours, with your husband's family name in front. The way you are called has changed. Your status has changed with it, as quickly as the morning light changes. You carry the bowls to the table. Your husband comes in, places a bundle of firewood by the hearth, washes his hands cursorily in the water barrel, and then eats his bowl. He eats quickly, without speaking. Occasionally, he glances up, as if wanting to say something, then thinks better of it. You don't ask either. Between you two are the sounds of spoons hitting bowls, the steam from the porridge fogging your vision, and the rustle of straw under your heels. Your mother-in-law finishes eating, sets her bowl down, and folds her napkin neatly. She looks out at the yard. Take the blanket out to air later. The house is damp. The words are light, the meaning heavy. You understand that to air also means for anyone who wants to look. Some villages hang out the sheet, some don't. Here, they leave the blanket on the fence for anyone passing by to see. No one points, but their eyes are working. You nod. She says nothing more. You take the blanket out to the yard. The sun is thin. The wind carries the smell of manure, grass, and freshly turned straw. You drape the blanket over the line and beat it to get the dust out. The woolen fibers vibrate, fine dust rising, sparkling in the sunlight like the flour dust under the mill. A few children run by, kicking at each other, giggling. A woman pokes her head over the fence. Thick blanket, warm. You reply, thick, heavy. She nods, smiles, with her lips pressed together, and pulls her head back in, just enough for her words to get stuck on the fence like a dry leaf. You go back inside to clear the bowls. The dishwater turns from clear to cloudy, from cold to warm, from clean to dirty. The smells of ash, grease, and barley mingle. Above, the mice are running again. You don't look up. The motions are repetitive. Rinse, scrub, stack. Your hands work first. Your mind follows. In the early light, your fingernails show the black ash clinging to them. You scrub, but the ash doesn't come off completely. It doesn't matter. Ash, flour, sweat, everything sticks. The chapel bell rings. Short, steady. Everyone looks up for a moment, out of habit, then goes back to their work. You wipe your hands, adjust your shawl, and follow your mother-in-law out the door. On the road, a few men are standing close together, talking quietly. One mentions the pasture, another the next year's barley share. Your father's name is mentioned once, then silence. You walk half a step faster. Everyone sees, everyone hears. No one lets on that they've heard. The chapel fills up. The smell of damp stone, incense, and sweat-soaked woolen clothes. You stand in the back row, your eyes on the floor. The priest reads in a steady, tired voice. The prayers are always the same. You think of nothing, just stand. When the final amen is said, everyone is silent for a beat, then shuffles out. Outside, the light is stronger, the wind blowing across the cold steps. Passing the well, you hear the half-joking questions again. Did you sleep well last night? The porridge was good this morning. The feast was so loud yesterday, wasn't it? The words come in layers, not too sarcastic, but not entirely well-intentioned either. They flow like the water in the ditch, clear to look at, but cloudy to the touch. You choose to nod. to smile just enough. No more, no less. Back in the yard, the blanket is half dry. The wind lifts the edge, the woolen fibers vibrating. You fold it and hold it to your chest. The smell of the young sun on the old wool is less heavy. In the kitchen, the hanging pot sways slightly as someone walks by. On the table, the wooden spoon your mother-in-law left last night is still there, its handle polished smooth, a small crack at the tip. You touch it, feeling the sense of belonging to the house without anyone needing to say it. It is heavy in your hand. Your husband carries a sack of flour across the yard. He turns his head slightly. This time, he stops and asks quietly, "Are you all right?" You reply, "I'm all right." He nods. It is enough for both of them. No extra words. The morning pulls everything back into the village's old rhythm. Flour into sacks, firewood into the hearth, water into the pot, people to their work. The wedding night, that phrase, in people's whispers, is so large. In your hands now, it is just a pile of bowls to be washed, a blanket to be aired, porridge to be stirred, and eyes that must look straight ahead when someone asks a roundabout question. You sit on the doorstep, take a small knife, and shave off a splinter from the broom handle. The knife is dull. It takes a long time. The wood shavings fall into a small pile, as light as flour dust. The wind blows them away. In the distance, the mill creaks steadily. The well echoes with the sound of the bucket, and the cowshed gives off the smell of warm straw. The village operates as it does every day, and you, the new wife, are placed into it, fitted in, and run along with it. No one announces the result of the night. There's no piece of paper, no proclamation, only glances and habits. If nothing major happens, people will fall silent. If something does, they won't need to shout. The news will find its own way. You gather the bowls and head towards the kitchen. On the way, you hear a child call you the miller's wife. You pause for a beat, then keep walking. The new name sticks to your back, like a layer of white flour dust. Light, but everywhere. You try to blow it off, but it doesn't all go away. It doesn't matter. You add more wood to the fire. The flame grows a little stronger. White steam rises, condensing on the wooden wall. The dawn has done its part. The rest is the whole day. And here, the whole day means work after work, person after person, word after word. You pull up your skirt a little, tie it securely, and begin. The truth is, last night is over. This morning, the village is seen. And you work. Day after day, no one beats a drum to announce it, but your body begins to remember the rhythm. Waking up half an hour before the roosters crow, your hands fumbling in the dark to start the fire, accustomed to the touch of cold kindling, to the sound of the hanging pot scraping against the iron hook. These motions repeat until they require no thought. Every morning, you carry the wooden bucket to the well. The cold water cuts your skin, making your shoulders tremble, but you don't complain. The people at the well don't ask anything directly, but a nod, a slow adjustment of a shawl, is enough to be a question. You answer with a bow of your head, nothing more. The fire in the hearth gradually becomes your responsibility. The previous night's ashes always leave a few embers. You just need to be patient in uncovering them. When the fire catches, the smoke hits your nose. You cough dryly. Your eyes sting. But you learn to squint and turn your face away from the wind. The iron pot hangs on its hook, the water bubbling, the smell of barley porridge spreading through the kitchen. That nutty smell clings to your hair, your sleeves, and no matter where you go, you can't shake it off. Your mother-in-law says little, but she always checks. She sits at the door, glancing at the pot, then at you, like a silent measuring stick. When the porridge is just thick enough, she gives a short nod, a sign of acceptance. You become more accustomed to that nod than to any word of praise. Your day is spread evenly between the kitchen, the yard, the well, and the fields. In the morning, you start the fire and cook. Midday, you take things out to air. The woolen blanket, patch clothes, straw for bedding. In the afternoon, you wash the pot, rinse the grains, and clear the ashes. In the evening, you sometimes follow the village women to gather firewood at the edge of the forest or collect grass for the cows. There is much to do, but every task is repetitive. Nothing is new. Only ways to do it faster, more efficiently, with fewer wasted motions. Your hands become calloused, the cracks at your fingertips raw, the smell of ash clinging to them. Your linen dress is worn, stained with sweat, but patching one spot only leads to another tear. The only new thing is the eyes around you. At first, they watched with curiosity. Now they watch with familiarity, no longer lingering. Curiosity fades, giving way to habit. He still says little. At breakfast, at dinner, he sits beside you, eating quickly, occasionally looking up as if to speak, then thinking better of it. But you notice small details. A few times, he pushes a piece of dried meat closer to your bowl, or when you're struggling to pull a bundle of firewood that's too large, he steps over to help lift it without a word. One day, at the well, the rope was too heavy, the bucket of water about to slip from your grasp. He was standing behind you, reached out to steady it, then immediately let go. You only heard him say, very quietly, "Be careful." You nodded, not looking back. But that "be careful," strangely, echoed in your mind until evening. Your mother-in-law still has the habit of glancing at the bed every morning. No words, just a glance. You get used to that glance, as you get used to the smoke. At first, it felt heavy. Later, just routine. She also teaches you a few more habits. Which line to hang the blanket on so the neighbors can see without commenting. How to wash the pot so the ash soap suds don't spill into the yard. You learn quietly, without asking questions. In the village, the women at the well still chatter. How was the first night? And are you well? Questions that sound like inquiries, but everyone knows the subtext. You just give a faint smile. Over time, those questions disappear, replaced by talk of the harvest, of the coming rain. People have new things to talk about, and the old stories fall away like dry leaves. Even so, the wedding night still has its echoes. Someone mentions that your house started the fire late. Another says the blanket was aired later than usual. These small tidbits float around the market, in drinking sessions, and then dissipate. You don't try to correct them. Don't defend yourself. Because here, rumors don't need to be true. They just need to exist. They find their own way and fall away when something newer comes along. You learn to walk past it. When you hear your name at the beginning of a story, you keep carrying your water bucket, keep washing your vegetables, keep starting the fire. People will eventually get bored and turn to another name. At night, when the whole house is asleep, you lie still, listening to the mice running in the rafters, the wind seeping through the cracks in the wall. The smell of wool, of straw, of smoke still clings to the blanket. You look at the ceiling, see the smoke stains spreading like the roots of a tree, and think of your parents in your old village, of friends who have faded from your memory. The longing is no longer a sharp pain, but a dull ache, covered by a thick layer of fabric. Every new day, you work. Every evening, you lie down. Life revolves, and you revolve with it. No one asks what you want anymore, only the unspoken question, have you done your duty? The following days pile on top of each other. The villagers stop looking at you as a stranger and start seeing you as one of them. You become that family's wife, that woman's daughter-in-law, no longer the girl from another village. This integration doesn't come with the sound of a drum, but with the ash under your fingernails, the smell of smoke in your hair, the familiar glances, and the tiny "be careful" one morning. The wedding night, which seemed like a major milestone, turns out to be just the beginning of a series of repetitive days. And you, like all the other women in the village, don't choose the milestones. You just choose to walk in step with the rhythm the village has set. At noon, your mother-in-law places a dark brown leather strap on the table. Hanging from the strap are several iron keys, the large one for the granary, the medium one for the salt chest, the small one for the cloth trunk and the coin box. She says curtly, "Wear this. It's your responsibility now." You pick it up. The leather is heavy, its edges stiff with sweat and age. The keys jingle against each other, cold in your hand. You tie it around your waist. That soft sound will follow you all day, a steady reminder of your duties. Hearth, granary, chest, box. In this village, a wife's power is not on paper. It hangs at her waist. The keys. You unlock the granary. The smell of dry grain rises, warm and dusty. Each handful of grain is a meal. Each spilled grain a mistake. You measure with a wooden ladle marked with worn lines, your hand steady. Next to it is the salt pot. The salt is caked white. It will sweat if it gets damp. You break off pieces, wrap them in dry leaves, and keep them tight. Salt is valuable, the sweat of the market, the thing that makes food food. You learn to use just the right amount. A slip of the hand is a sin. The hearth is your domain. You start it in the morning, maintain it at noon, and put it out in the evening. You know where the draft is, which pile of ashes still holds embers, which pot leaks steam, which spoon has a cracked tip. The fire speaks in crackles, in stinging smoke, in the heat that dries your eyes. You answer by adding wood at the right time, turning the pot with the right hand. No one applauds a perfectly cooked porridge, but the whole family will remember if it's burnt. Every week, you take eggs, a bundle of vegetables, and a little sourdough starter to the market. The road is muddy, your shoes stick, but you walk quickly. At the market, a wife's voice is clearer than at home. You bargain, you trade, you remember who owes you. In your hand is a tally stick, a small piece of wood with notches carved into it. A debt to the woman in the blue dress is 1 notch. A trade for salt with the old man with the silver beard is 2. Not everyone can read, but everyone can read the notches. You stand by the salt stall, the sharp smell stinging your nose. You trade eggs for dried onions, a little sourdough starter for some honey. The market buzzes with a steady hum, the old calls repeating, bread here, needles and thread here, pots for mending here. You say little, but watch much. The seller who knows the real price has the upper hand. You learn quickly, not to get ahead, but to not be taken advantage of. The laws here are not just made by the village chief or written on a notice in the chapel. There are unwritten laws. Hang the blanket on the right line, not the left. The adults' bowls go on top, the children's below. Bread is divided in order. The hard-working men eat first, the women after. There are unwritten punishments. Anyone who speaks rudely to their mother-in-law will find no one willing to share the well rope the next day. Anyone who throws a bowl in the house will hear rough music outside their door at night. The village boys banging pots and pans, shouting, a form of public shaming. There is no whip, but losing face is a whip. A wife learns to navigate these laws. Speak just enough. Get the work done. Don't let small matters become village gossip. On Sunday, you stand in the back row of the chapel, your eyes on the damp stone floor. The priest reads, "Wives, submit to your husbands." The words fall steadily, like a light rain, soaking in slowly. Here, God does not visit your home, but he passes through your customs. You don't argue with the sermon. You argue with the porridge pot, the water bucket, the dwindling salt. The church provides the frame. The hearth provides the life. You understand implicitly. If you have to rely on the priest to settle a fight at home, you've already lost in the kitchen. You still go to confession when it's time. You speak briefly, naming no one. The priest nods and assigns a few prayers. You say them, then go home and start the fire. The fire is your prayer. Your mother-in-law is not harsh with her words, but with her eyes. She watches how you stack the firewood, big ends at the bottom or top, enough space for the wind to pass through. She watches how you air the wool. Is the hem facing the sun? She looks at the floor. Are the footprints dry or still wet? Each of her glances is a line item in an unwritten apprenticeship. When you do it right, she doesn't praise you. When you do it wrong, she coughs softly and turns away. You understand. The next time, you correct it. He says little, but his cough at the door when it gets dark is his way of announcing, "I'm home." You hear that cough and know to set out the bowl, the salt, the seat. When he's tired, his shoulders slumped, you add a little extra fat to his bowl. When he's happy, laughing, you pour his weak beer fuller. The status of a wife lies in being half a step ahead, having what is needed ready, clearing away what is in the way. In return, there are boundaries you don't cross. The price of milling, the division of the flour, the dispute over the water ditch with the neighbors. That is his domain. You don't enter it unless he tells you to. In the village, boundaries keep the peace. The hearth is yours. The mill is his. The carrying pole on your shoulder leaves a mark after a few trips to the well. You learn to put the weight on your hips so your shoulders don't break. Your hands crack. You rub them with lard. It's sticky and dirty, but it soothes the sting. In the rainy season, your woolen clothes are damp all day, the musty smell lingering. During the harvest, your calloused hands are cut by the sharp straw. Your shins are covered in scratches. No one writes it down, but your body keeps a record. Calluses are words. Bruises are punctuation. At night, you stretch your back on the hard straw mattress. The sound of your bones creaking softly, a sound no one hears but you. You touch your belly and think of what the priest said. Children. Fear comes with hope. Fear of pain, of loss, of whispers. Hope that the village will stop talking, that the house will have more hands. The two are intertwined like a thorny vine. It constricts, but it doesn't let go. Within the tight frame, there's still a small margin. A wife's power lies in moderation. You save salt, but the family still finds the food flavorful. You water down the beer, but the men still nod in satisfaction. You trade for a half handful more, and no one knows. You keep 2 eggs to hatch instead of selling them all. A little less, a little more. Life turns on these littles. You also have the power of small refusals. When someone asks to borrow a cracked pot, you say, "It's in use." When the neighbor's daughter asks for fat to fry with, you give her the old fat. When your mother-in-law tells you to hang the blanket on the outer line, you delay a moment because it's not dry yet. These small delays are the thin fences you build around yourself. You have allies, the women of the village, the midwife at the end of the lane with her rough hands and steady voice, the weaver, thin and with bright eyes, the salt seller, quick-witted and quicker on her feet. They exchange information quietly. Which day, the priest is in a bad mood. Which day, the mill is acting up. Which day, the well water is cloudy and needs to be boiled longer. One day, you give the midwife a piece of bread. She nods and says quietly, "When the pain comes, bite on this, not your tongue." Not beautiful advice, but true advice. At the market, when you're being haggled down, the weaver coughs and stands a little closer to you. The haggler looks over and eases up. The alliance of women needs no oath, only proximity. When something big happens, a child falls seriously ill, a cow goes missing, a dispute over a water ditch, the door to the priest is opened. You walk behind your husband, saying nothing. When you leave, you walk half a step in front of him to shield him from the children throwing stones. Small acts of propriety like this keep the family from losing more face. If there is a physical altercation, a slap, a shout, you have 2 choices. Stay silent and let your mother-in-law see, or tell your own mother in your old village. Speaking has a price. The long road, the words that come back, the rumors. Silence also has a price. A bruise hidden under a shawl. A wife weighs these 2 prices every night. There is no justice, only less loss. During the harvest, you go to the fields at the end of the day to glean the fallen grain. The right to glean is a rare privilege for poor women, a right allowed by the village and by God. No one curses a gleaner if they bend their back in the right place. You bend, you pick, you put it in your basket. The fallen grains are not many, but they make the porridge half a spoonful thicker. When the sun sets behind the mill, you count the keys one last time. The granary is locked, the trunk is latched, the box is secured. The sound of the keys hitting each other is as small as the sound of raindrops. You hang the leather strap on a hook by the bed. Your back feels lighter, but your waist still has a mark. You rub it, feeling the heat under your skin. The keys are power, but also a burden. You lie down, listening to the wind, the mice, the distant creak of the mill. Tomorrow will be like today, and the day after. The status of a wife here is not written in books. It is imprinted on your shoulders, your fingers, your hips, in the jingle of the keys with every step. And amidst those small sounds, sometimes you steal a moment of peace, blowing out the candle, sighing, placing a hand on your belly, listening to your own steady heartbeat. You think, I cannot choose the frame, but I can choose the rhythm. Today's fire burns more gently than yesterday's. Today's salt is more balanced than yesterday's. Today's porridge is nuttier than yesterday's. These small things, put together, make a life. It is enough to get through this season, to wait for the next. You close your eyes. Outside, the wind taps lightly on the door. Inside, the keys hanging by the bed touch each other gently. That small sound, every night. It is your new name. The news came not in words, but in small signs. You couldn't swallow your porridge in the morning. You felt lightheaded. The smell of pork fat made you nauseous, and your lower back grew heavy, as if being pulled down by an invisible hand. Your mother-in-law looked at you and nodded slightly. Without needing confirmation, the whole family knew you were pregnant. At the well that afternoon, the old women smiled knowingly. The weaver exclaimed, "Oh, so soon," then pretended to turn away. The children ran around, chanting an old nursery rhyme. "Who's with child? Who's with child?" rubbing her round belly. You looked down, the water from your bucket splashing onto your dress. In the village, news didn't need a mouth. It flowed like an underground stream. Every day, you noticed a new mark. Your feet swelled, your ankles grew larger, your skin stretched with lines like thorny vines. Your body no longer belonged to you. It belonged to the family. Your mother-in-law rationed your food. Less salt, more thin porridge. You were hungry, but you didn't argue. Hunger now was for the common good, because the child in your belly needed peace. The villagers said, "A pregnant woman is like a stone. Hold it carefully, and it stays round. Drop it, and it breaks." The words sounded ordinary, but everyone remembered them. You walked more carefully when carrying water, paused longer when climbing the ladder. Your mother-in-law took over the heavy tasks, but the small ones still fell to you. No one let you rest. They only let you speak less. On the straw bed, you tossed and turned, aching no matter which way you lay. The child moved inside you, and you listened intently, as if hearing a strange knock at the door. Each small kick was a reminder. It would be a long time before this was over. Your husband still said little, but his hand rested on your shoulder longer, as if to say he was counting the days with you. Occasionally, the midwife would visit, carrying a small cloth bag. She would open it, and the pungent smell of mugwort, fennel, and verbena would fill the air. She would say, "Drink this to breathe easier. Rub this to ease the pain." You listened and did as you were told, though you didn't know if it really worked. The midwife would smile her toothless smile. "This trade has no books. It's all passed down through blood and bone." You shivered, but still drank the bitter concoction. No one called you by your given name anymore. They called you the boy's mother, the belly's mother. Since your belly started to show, your name had changed. You felt both lighter, because you were no longer the new scrutinized daughter-in-law, and heavier, because now you were their vessel for procreation. In your heart, two things always went together: fear of death and hope for life. You knew how many women in the village had died in childbirth, bleeding like a river, their screams still echoing at the well. But you also knew that if you survived, you would have a more secure place. Your child would be the rope that tied you to this house, the reason for your existence that no one could push away. Every step you took was new news for the village. They watched your belly grow like they watched the rice fields. No one said it out loud, but in their eyes. If you gave birth to a son, you were lucky. If you gave birth to a daughter, you were just adequate. One late winter night, as the wind whistled through the cracks in the door, you were startled awake by the first contraction. At first, it was just like a pinprick in your lower abdomen, but with each one, it tightened, like an invisible hand squeezing you. You clutched your belly and sat up on the straw bed, sweat beading on your skin despite the cold. Your mother-in-law heard the movement and sat up immediately, her eyes bright in the darkness. She asked nothing, just turned and called out urgently, "Go get the midwife, quickly." Your husband hastily threw on his coat and ran out into the thick fog. The sound of his footsteps mixed with the wind, disappearing down the path to the midwife's house. In an instant, the small house was transformed. The straw blankets were pushed to one side. A basin of water was brought in. The fire was stoked, its flames flickering, the smoke stinging your nose. The smell of smoke mixed with the smell of herbs, mugwort, verbena, pungent and strong, overpowering the familiar musty smell. A few neighboring women entered quietly, uninvited. This was a communal affair, everyone understood. They brought cloths, fabric, and placed a pot of water by the fire. Their whispers were like the buzzing of bees, low, discreet, but urgent. The door burst open, and the midwife entered. Her figure stooped, but nimble. She wore a gray cloth headscarf and carried a bag of herbs. With just one look, she gave her orders. Lay her down, head propped up. Get the rope, get clean cloths. No one argued. Her voice was as sharp as a knife, accustomed to facing life and death. She sat down beside you, her hands warm, the smell of mugwort sharp. Breathe deep, breathe slow. This will be a long night. The pain came in waves, one after another. You gripped the edge of the bed, your nails tearing the fabric. A cry escaped you, uncontrollable, echoing in the small room. Outside, the neighbors gathered, the children huddled by their mothers, the men sitting around a bonfire, their faces tense. In the village, every birth was like a battle. Everyone knew it could be won or lost. Your screams were not just for your family to hear, but for the whole village. It reminded everyone how fragile life was. The night dragged on. Every moment felt like an hour. When a contraction came, you tensed your body. When it passed, you collapsed, breathless. The midwife would occasionally pat your back, murmuring an ancient prayer. Your mother-in-law stood at the foot of the bed, holding a cloth, her lips pressed tightly together. Your husband was not allowed inside. He paced back and forth on the porch. Occasionally, he would stop and look up at the misty sky, as if searching for an answer somewhere far away. Then the moment came, when the midwife's voice was a low growl. "One more time. Push!" You screamed, your breath catching, your whole body feeling as if it would break apart. Then, a brief silence, as if the whole house held its breath. It was followed by a cry, small but piercing, weak but persistent. The first cry, cutting through the smell of smoke, of sweat, through the thick night. The whole room sighed in relief. A neighboring woman burst into tears. Your mother-in-law sank onto a chair, her trembling hands covering her face. The midwife wrapped the baby in a piece of cloth, held it up for everyone to see, and nodded. You lay limp, drenched in sweat, as if you had just emerged from a river. Your vision was blurry, You could only see a shadow leaning over you. Perhaps your mother-in-law, perhaps your husband, but you weren't sure. You only heard the whispers around you change. A boy. It's over. He's alive. You hadn't seen your child's face, didn't know if it was a boy or a girl, but you knew one thing for sure. Your status had changed. From now on, you were not just a wife, not just a daughter-in-law. You were a mother. In this village, that was the only shield against being erased. Outside, the rooster crowed for the third time. Dawn had not yet broken, but in the small house, a new life had just taken its first breath. And for you, the journey had opened to a new chapter. A chapter that the whole village would watch, step by step. From the day your child first cried, the rhythm of the small house changed completely. It was no longer the rooster's crow that announced the morning, or the sound of the buffalo bell that signaled the time to go to the fields, but the piercing cry of a baby. When it cried, everything stopped. The cooking had to wait. The water drawing had to wait. The conversation had to be cut short. The whole family revolved around a tiny body, the size of a forearm, as red as a newborn mouse. The child, not yet able to open its eyes, became the center of attention. The grandmother held it. The father peeked at it. The neighbors came to visit. You, who had just lost so much blood, you were nearly faint, suddenly felt pushed to the outer circle. No one asked how you were eating anymore. Only, is it nursing well? Does it cry a lot? Does it sleep peacefully? You felt both lighter, because the scrutiny was no longer on you, and heavier, because now your entire value was placed on the baby. The news spread quickly. That family had a son, or that family had another daughter. If you had a son, the whispers were accompanied by smiles. Good. Now the family has an heir. If it was a daughter, the whispers changed their tone. Well, a girl is still a person. People congratulated you in two different ways, with different smiles, even different handshakes. In medieval society, the gender of a child determined its mother's future. The baby cried all night, and you got no sleep. Breast milk was not enough. It was hungry. It screamed, and you had to resort to a cloth dipped in honey or a little thin porridge. But raising a child was not just about feeding. With every breath, you carried a burden. Will it survive the winter? Will it get a fever, be troubled by forest spirits? Will it be strong enough to stand up when the harvest comes? The midwife said, raising a child is like tending a fire. You have to shield it from every gust of wind. You held your child in your arms and felt the truth of those words. Every morning when you went to the well, the baby was in a sling on your shoulder. Immediately, all eyes were on it. Some praised its resemblance to its father. Others said it looked like its grandfather. No one mentioned you. The child was not just your child, but the whole village's, a source of pride, a shared worry. If it cried a lot, people said you weren't raising it well. If it was plump, everyone watched it like a good rice harvest. At night, you watched your child breathe wheezily, its small chest rising and falling. You didn't dare to close your eyes, afraid that in just a second, that breath would stop. But at the same time, you also saw a glimmer of hope. If it lived, you would have a secure place. If it was a boy, you would have a shield for your whole life. If it was a girl, at least you had a rope that tied you to this house. The villagers never stopped talking. They compared your child to others. Who got their teeth first? who turned over faster, who was plumper. Behind their laughter was a silent competition among the mothers, a competition you were forced to join, whether you wanted to or not. You thought that after giving birth, the long nights would be over, but it turned out the nights were even longer because of the baby's cries, because your milk ran dry, because the cold seeped into your bones. Occasionally, your husband would sit up and hold the baby so you could get some sleep, but only for a little while. Then he had to go to the fields at dawn. The main burden still fell on your shoulders, like every other wife in the village. When you watched your child sleep, its eyes half closed, its tiny hand in its mouth, you understood. From now on, your life was completely tied to it. And in the eyes of the village, you had only one new title: the mother of this child. Your real name, your dreams, your private pains, all were submerged under that role. But perhaps, in the harshness of the medieval village, that was also the only comfort. When the first rice stalks began to turn yellow, the village awoke to an old rhythm. The harvest waits for no one. The sick must go to the fields. The new mothers must go. You hadn't fully recovered from the months of holding a crying baby at night, but the call of the fields could not be refused. Your child, who could only babble a few sounds, still red and fragile, had to be brought to the edge of the rice paddy. People placed babies in wicker cradles or large baskets lined with dry straw, covered with a cloth. The baby slept in the shade of a tree, while you bent your back to reap. Its cries mingled with the sound of sickles cutting, of rice stalks falling. In the village, a wife did not just raise her child. You had to hold your baby, carry straw, and pull weeds. When your hands were muddy, you would run back to wipe your child's face, then return to the fields as if you had never rested. No one gave you the right to sit still. You are a member of this family. You must work like everyone else, your mother-in-law reminded you, not harshly, but firmly. You felt yourself split in two, half of you for the fields, half for the baby. And both halves were hungry, both were tired. Every day began with the rooster's crow, followed by the sound of the water wheel, of sickles, of carrying poles clashing. Every evening ended with the panting breaths of those returning from the fields. Life repeated itself, like a wheel that never stopped turning. You realized it wasn't just you, but all the women in the village lived like this. Pregnant women reaped, women with newborns reaped, widows reaped. The harvest spared no one. Sometimes, you saw your husband working diligently, sweat pouring down, his hands calloused, but he was still considered the pillar of the family. As for you, you had to bear the burden of labor and also the invisible judgment. Was your child plump? Were you a good mother? Were you working fast enough? One slow step, and the village would whisper. At noon, everyone sat on the edge of the paddy, eating a piece of black bread, a piece of dry cheese, and drinking plain water. You hastily breastfed your baby, while your hand still gripped the sickle. Sometimes, the smell of milk mixed with the smell of straw, of sweat, making you feel like a part of the fields, no longer a separate person. The harvest passed, and the sowing season came again. You held your child as it grew with each cycle. Just yesterday, you were placing it in a basket. Now, it was learning to crawl on the edge of the paddy. Each of its toddling steps was tied to a season of ripe rice. You suddenly realized a person's life is just a long harvest season. born, growing up, working, then growing old. One evening, as the sun, red as fire, set behind the mountains, you sat down to rest, holding your sleeping child in your arms. Around you, the villagers were still cutting, still carrying, still hurrying. In that moment, you saw the truth clearly. No one could escape the cycle. And you, like your child, had been swept into it from the moment you opened your eyes. The village drum sounded, signaling the end of the day. People gathered their sickles, tied up the straw, and smiled tiredly. You stood up, the burden on your shoulders, not just a bundle of rice, but the entire future of your child. In the cycle of the harvest, you understood. Every grain of rice was the flesh and blood of the family, and every drop of your sweat would be imprinted on your child's life forever. Every Sunday morning, even before the second rooster crow, the sound of the church bell echoed from the high tower. That sound seeped through every thatched roof, waking even the sleeping children. You held your child, put on a thick cloth coat, and followed your husband and family to the stone tower. No one was allowed to be absent. In the village, someone who missed church was considered to have abandoned God, which meant abandoning the community. The church was not just a place to pray. It was where laws were enforced, where all eyes were on you, where the fate of every family was shaped. You remembered your wedding day. Before the priest, you and your husband exchanged vows not to each other, but to God. Marriage was not just a matter for two families, but a covenant before God. Therefore, when you entered the life of a wife, you were not only under the control of the village, of your relatives, but also of the church. Divorce? It didn't exist. Love? Not necessary. Only duty. The priest repeated over and over that a wife must obey her husband, a husband must protect his wife, and both must have children to enrich God's flock. When you gave birth, the priest came to give his blessing. The baby, less than a week old, was brought to the holy well to be baptized. In the eyes of the village, if it was not baptized, it did not truly belong to the community. If it happened to die before then, its soul could not enter heaven. For you, every pregnancy was not just a physical worry, but also a moral burden. People said, having many children is a blessing. Refusing your husband or limiting childbirth is a sin. Your body, even in the most private matters, was under the shadow of the cross. Every sermon in the service focused on the same point: sin and redemption. Woman, from Eve, bore the original sin, so she must live humbly, patiently. You heard those words over and over, to the point where you sometimes felt guilty just for sighing or for daring to dream of another life. The eyes in the village looked at each other during the sermon, as if to silently remind, whoever strays from the path, whoever does wrong, will be exposed. The church was both a comfort for the soul and a tool for controlling every action, every thought. From birth to death, a person's life was closely tied to the church. Children were baptized. Young people had their confirmation. Marriages were blessed. The dead were buried in holy ground. Without the church, you had no place in the village. Without the sacraments, you were considered an outcast, even cursed. You understood. That stone roof did not just shelter you from the wind and rain, but also enclosed your entire life. There were long nights when your child was sick, when the harvest failed, that you prayed sincerely. Those prayers helped you endure, like a small candle in the darkness. That faith was real, undeniable. But at the same time, faith was also like a chain. It kept you within the framework, forbade you from asking questions, and forced you to accept all suffering as God's will. When you left the church, the early morning sun shone down on the stone courtyard. Your child ran around happily, your husband walked behind, and the neighbors greeted each other with the sign of the cross. You did the same, your hand trembling, not sure if it was out of reverence or fear. In this village, in this life, no one could escape the church. It was both a place to look up to for hope and a place that reminded you that you were forever just a part of a predetermined cycle. In the village, there were no high walls or guards. The people were each other's guards. Every small alley, every well, every path seemed to have invisible eyes watching. When you went to the fields, when you carried water, even when you stood at your door holding your child, you knew for sure that someone was watching. The old people sat under the eaves, weaving baskets. The children ran and played, but their ears were listening. The women washed vegetables by the stream, their eyes darting back and forth. Nothing escaped their sight. At first, the rumors were just whispers. Is that girl a hard worker? Was there a fight in their house last night? The child looks weak. Is it because the mother doesn't know how to care for it? These questions floated like dust. No one answered them, but everyone remembered. Then one day, they became the truth in the eyes of the village, even though no one had witnessed them firsthand. Rumors had more power than a whip. No one hit you, but with just one wrong word, your honor could be destroyed. People would avoid you, wouldn't let their children near your house, and would whisper when you passed. In the village, being disliked was worse than being poor. You could beg if you were poor, but if you were disliked, no one would lend a hand. Even at church, you felt the prying eyes. People noticed if you bowed your head low enough, if you made the sign of the cross slowly enough. At the well, they watched to see how much water you drew, if you were wasteful. In the fields, they guessed if you reaped as fast as the others. There were no written laws for these things, but all your actions were measured by the community's eyes. Women were often the most scrutinized. A laugh that was a little too loud was considered flirtatious. A step that was a little too slow was considered lazy. Even the way you held your child, the way you spoke to your husband, could become a topic of gossip. While men were judged only by their labor and their ability to pay taxes, women were monitored in both their private lives and their morals. You understood clearly. With just one small mistake, you would be labeled, and that label would follow you for the rest of your life. Sometimes, you heard your own name in a seemingly harmless conversation. The feeling sent a chill down your spine, as if you were being tied up. You wanted to argue, but the more you spoke up, the more people thought you were guilty. So you stayed silent, and the silence only made the rumors spread further. You gradually learned to walk at a moderate pace, not too fast to be considered hot-tempered, not too slow to be called lazy. You learned to smile softly, to nod at the right time, to speak little but just enough. You turned yourself into a person who fit in, to survive in the invisible circle of surveillance. That afternoon, as you carried your basket of vegetables past the well and heard giggles behind you, you knew they were talking about you again. But you didn't turn around. didn't react. You just kept walking, holding the basket tighter, and thought to yourself, in this village, words are as light as the wind, but they are enough to tilt a whole life. From the day you set foot in your new home, you lived not only with your husband, but also under the shadow of your mother-in-law. She was the one who had given birth to your husband, who had raised him, who had been a daughter-in-law before you, and had endured the harsh years of this village. Now, she was like a constant presence, in the kitchen, in the yard, even in every word you spoke. A mother-in-law was not just a mother. She was the guardian of the family's honor. She watched your every move, from the way you washed the rice, tended the fire, to the way you spoke to your husband and held your child. In her eyes, you were not just acting for yourself, but representing the entire lineage. Therefore, every small mistake, spilling water in the yard, burning the rice, overcooking the vegetables, could become a reason for her to scold you. And her scolding was not gentle, but as heavy as a verdict. You gradually realized that the challenges did not come from big things, but from the small frictions of everyday life. When you were still not used to starting the fire, she would stand and watch, then sigh, as if to say, "Girls these days are so clumsy." When you carried water a little too slowly, she would smile wryly. "When I was your age, I carried twice as much." Those words were not just reminders, but like a dull knife slowly cutting into your self-esteem. Sometimes, you and your mother-in-law faced each other in silence. A look, a raised eyebrow, a long sigh was enough to create an invisible battle. You didn't dare to argue, because arguing was disrespectful. But you also didn't want to submit, because if you always submitted, you would lose yourself. So, you learned to be clever, to be silent at the right time, to do your work before being told, so that outsiders would see a peaceful family. But in your heart, you knew that peace was bought with your exhaustion. In the village, the relationship between a mother-in-law and a daughter-in-law was not just a private matter. People often made comparisons. That family's daughter-in-law is more skillful than this one's. That mother-in-law is easier to get along with than that one. So, you lived not only to please her, but also to please the entire village of watchful eyes. If your mother-in-law praised you in front of others, it was an honor. But if she criticized you, the whole village would laugh. However, sometimes you caught a different look in your mother-in-law's eyes. When she saw you holding your child, she would be silent for a long time, as if remembering herself in the old days. When your back was drenched in sweat in the fields, she would mumble, "A woman's life. It's all the same." In that moment, between the two generations, there was a fragile understanding, but it passed as quickly as the wind. You understood that your trial was not a one-time event, but a lifelong one. Your mother-in-law was not an enemy, but she was never a support either. She was a wall that you had to learn to lean on, to avoid, and sometimes to resist in silence. In this house, your existence was not only determined by your husband, but also by your mother-in-law's nod or shake of the head. When winter came, the whole village sank into a heavy silence. The stone walls of the house could not keep the warmth in, only the whistling wind. You wrapped your child in a worn woolen cloth and leaned against the dying fire. The smell of smoke seeped into your hair, your clothes, but it couldn't drive away the cold that rose from the earth. In the yard, the water barrel was frozen solid, the village well covered with a thin layer of ice. The cold not only bit into your flesh, but also gnawed at your spirit. The sacks of grain in the granary had been dwindling since the harvest. The turnips, onions, and garlic, the meager reserves, were shriveled and soft in the root cellar. Every day, there was only thin porridge, sometimes with a little salt, or if you were lucky, a piece of dried pork fat. The child in your arms cried hoarsely from hunger. Every spoonful of porridge for your child was a spoonful less for you, but you did it anyway, because an adult's hunger could be endured, but a child's cry could break your heart. Even in winter, the work did not stop. You still had to go to the fields to clear the straw, chop wood, and mix manure for the next season. Your hands were chapped, bleeding, the blood sticking to the handle of the hoe. Every swing of the axe was a stab into your tired muscles, but you couldn't stop. In the village, it was the same for everyone. The men strained to carry logs. The women bent over to carry water. The older children were sent to gather dry branches. No one could escape the cycle of the seasons, even when the ground was covered in ice. In the cold, sickness came easily. Coughs, fevers, pneumonia, they all spread from house to house like the wind. In any house with a seriously ill person, the flickering candlelight at night was a sad signal to the whole village. You held your child, whispering a prayer that the cold wind would not take its breath away. Winter also made the conflicts in the house more apparent. Your mother-in-law became more irritable when food was scarce, when the firewood burned faster than expected. Every look, every word from her was sharper. Your husband said little, only shouldering the heavy work, but his silence was sometimes heavier than a shout. You felt trapped between the hunger, the cold, and the invisible pressure from your family. The whole village seemed to shrink. The once crowded road now only had footprints on the ice. The village market was empty, no longer smelling of roasted meat or bread, only the wind blowing through the empty stalls. People stayed in their houses, huddled together, burning every branch of firewood, counting the days. The winter rumors were also different. No more talk of love affairs or jealousy, but of who would survive, who would fall. And yet, even in the midst of this harshness, you sometimes noticed the small moments that kept people alive. A bowl of porridge shared by the fire. A rare evening when the whole family sat together, telling old stories to forget the whistling wind. A flickering candle, but enough to see each other's faces. You understood that winter not only tested the body's endurance, but also the bonds between people. On the last night of winter, you held your child and listened to the wind howling outside the door. In the darkness, you suddenly realized if you could survive this season, you would be stronger than ever. And it was these harsh winters, not the bountiful harvests, that shaped the life of a woman in a medieval village. In the village, scent was not a luxury, but a reality that clung to the skin. When you stepped outside, your breath immediately met the smell of kitchen smoke lingering on the thatched roofs, the smell of livestock manure rising from the barns next to the houses, and the musty smell of damp earth after rain. There was no truly fresh air. Bathing was rare, the water was freezing, and soap was a luxury. People lived with their own smells. The smell of sweat soaked into the linen. The smell of grease from the kitchen clung to the hair. The smell of feet from shoes and socks not changed often. You sat next to your husband and smelled the strong scent of cheap beer on his breath. The smell of sweat mixed with tobacco smoke. It was not something to be ashamed of, just the reality of life. Your small house was always a mixture of countless smells. Smoke from the coal fire, the smell of dry grass from the bed, the smell of animal manure wafting in from the barn next door, the smell of damp woolen cloth when it rained, and above all, the smell of milk, of thin porridge, of a baby's waist, the signs of a large family. Sometimes, you couldn't distinguish the smell of your own house from the smell of the village. Everything blended together, becoming the common breath of the era. The livestock barn was right next to the kitchen. The smell of cow, horse, and chicken manure never disappeared, only changed with the seasons. Thick and heavy in winter, pungent in summer. People used manure to fertilize the fields, to burn for warmth. Therefore, that smell was not just an unpleasantness, but also the smell of life, the smell that nourished the next season. Food also had its own smell, usually monotonous and repetitive. Thin porridge day after day, the smell of boiled turnips, the smell of burnt black bread. Rarely was there the smell of roasted meat, and when there was, the whole village seemed to be drawn to it, standing outside, sniffing greedily. You remembered clearly the rare afternoon you had meat soup, the rich, savory steam rising from the copper pot, completely overpowering the usual musty smell of the house. For you, it was a moment of luxury, however fleeting. Even a sacred place like the church had a smell. The scent of herbal incense mixed with the musty smell of old stone. The smell of sweat from dozens of bodies crowded together in prayer. The space should have been pure, but it was heavy, with a smell that reminded you that people, even before God, could not escape the smell of the world. For you, every smell was a reminder. The smell of breast milk on your clothes reminded you that your child was growing. The faint smell of your husband's sweat after a day of plowing reminded you of his burden. The smell of kitchen smoke that made your eyes water reminded you that another day had passed. Smell was something no one named, but everyone carried with them. It haunted you like a shadow, invisible, but enveloping your entire life. You understood that the memories of your life were not just in images or sounds, but also in smells. They clung to every layer of fabric, every strand of hair, every calloused finger. And perhaps, even if you left this village, that smell would follow you, like the indelible mark of a life in the Middle Ages. Every morning, you put on a worn and torn linen shirt, the coarse fabric scratching your skin. Over it, a thick woolen dress, heavy and smelling of the animal fat, rubbed into the fibers to prevent mold. The clothes were not much warmer, but they showed who you were. A peasant's wife, not rich, not elegant, just enough to cover yourself. The winter cold still seeped through the gaps, and in the summer, sweat would collect, making the fabric heavy and the smell even stronger. Clothes were never easily bought new. When they tore, you took a rusty needle and spare thread and patched the hole. The overlapping patches became a map of poverty on your body. Anyone could tell your family's circumstances by looking at your clothes. Just one clumsy patch could reveal that you had nothing to hide. Sometimes you wore your mother-in-law's old clothes, faded and shorter than your body. They didn't fit, but you had to wear them, as if you were wearing both her power and her confinement. Your clothes were mostly brown, gray, and beige, the colors of the earth. Bright dyes were a luxury for the upper classes: red, blue, purple. You saw the nobility at church in their vibrant cloaks, fine wool, embroidered with gold thread, and realized the class distinction needed no words. Color was an invisible wall that divided people into layers. Clothing was not just for wearing, but also for control. The church and the village imposed rules. Married women had to cover their hair with a scarf. Dresses could not be too short. Shoes had to be simple. Any deviation was gossiped about, suspected of being arrogant or sinful. You sometimes wished you could let your hair fly in the wind, wear a brightly colored dress, but the village's gaze reminded you that such a dream was also a sin. On your head, you wore a cloth scarf, not just to keep your hair in place, but also to preserve your honor. The scarf was both a protection and a shackle. Every time you tightened the cord around your waist, you felt as if you were tying yourself to your roles: wife, mother, daughter-in-law. When you went out, people recognized each other by these details. You were not just you. You were the scarf, the dress, the woolen shirt you wore every day. Even your child could not escape. It wore clothes made from adults' clothes, the sleeves too long, a cord tied around its waist. When the baby cried, the smell of milk and old cloth mingled. You knew that, like you, it would also grow up in the binding layers of its life's clothes. In a rare moment, when you took off your scarf and let your hair down, you felt as if you were removing a mask. But that was only at home, when no one was watching. Outside, you put it back on, as if you were wearing the village's gaze and judgment on your shoulders. You understood that clothes were never just fabric. They were a sign of poverty, of order, of social shackles. And it was they that made you remember your status clearly, that you were not just wearing clothes, you were wearing the control of the era on your skin. Early in the morning, you brought a pot of thin porridge to the table. Just oats, cooked with water, with a little salt if you were lucky. It smelled bland, but it was what kept people alive. You fed your child spoonful by spoonful, then took the leftovers for yourself. Your stomach growled with hunger, but you were used to it. Hunger was no longer a surprise. It was just the background music of your life. Your meals always revolved around dry black bread, wilted vegetables, and sometimes a piece of cheese as hard as a rock. Meat was a luxury, seen only on church holidays, or when a sick animal was slaughtered so as not to waste it. At those times, the whole village would gather, not just to share, but to savor the rare, rich aroma. Imagining the feasts of the nobility, full of wine, meat, and fruit imported from afar, you understood the deep chasm of class. As for you, on your table was only food for survival, not for enjoyment. But sometimes, even poverty gave birth to beauty. You remembered clearly the moment a pot of turnip soup bubbled on the hearth, the steam rising, its gentle aroma overpowering the musty smell of the house. Your child sat beside you, cheeks flushed, looking into the pot with bright eyes. In that moment, food was not just food. It was a fragile hope, a small comfort from the world. In the winter, when food ran out, hunger turned into a long silence. In the house, everyone was quiet, avoiding each other's eyes, because they knew there was nothing left to share. The sound of a rumbling stomach, the was a cruel reminder. You bit into a piece of bread so hard it made your gums bleed, but you swallowed it because you knew if you didn't swallow, you would die. Meals also reflected the order in the house. Your husband sat at the head of the table and ate first. The children sat next. You usually ate last, with whatever was left. It was an unwritten law. No one argued. In your mother-in-law's eyes, you saw it clearly. A good wife had to know her place, even at the dinner table. Even food was tied to faith. During Lent, you and the whole village had to abstain from meat, fasting to show your piety. But in reality, many poor people didn't need to wait for Lent to fast because meat was never readily available. When you heard the priest preach that fasting purifies the soul, you thought to yourself, the souls of the poor must be the purest because they are always hungry. Every time you fed your child a bowl of porridge, you felt both relieved and afraid. Relieved because today it had something to eat. Afraid because you didn't know if there would be enough tomorrow. The child grew up on thin milk and bland porridge, its chubby cheeks quickly shrinking during the lean season. You looked at your child, feeling both love and helplessness. In the village, everyone had memories of the great famines. People whispered about death, about the children who didn't survive the winter. Those stories were told as a warning. Hunger didn't just empty the stomach, it could wipe out a whole family. Food, for you, was not just something you put in your mouth. It was a measure of life and death, of joy and shame. A day with a full stomach was a day of grace. A day of hunger was a day your soul was tested, and that cycle would never end. For that was the life of a medieval woman. In your village, no one had a clock. Time was measured by the sun and the church bell. You woke up when the sun rose. You went to the fields when the church bell rang. You returned when the sunset painted the thatched roofs red. Time did not belong to you. It belonged to nature and the church. Every toll of the bell was like an invisible command. You heard it, you obeyed, you had no right to be late. Every day was the same. Morning, the hearth, noon, the fields, afternoon, the well, evening, the fire. The rhythm repeated, without rest. Your body was like a millstone, constantly turning, and the grinding sound in your bones was a reminder. Time was wearing you down, bit by bit. Spring was for sowing, summer for tending the fields, autumn for harvesting, winter for surviving. Each season was a different prison. You knew this schedule so well, you could remember it with your eyes closed. There was no freedom. If you didn't sow, you would starve. If you didn't reap, you would die. Even when you gave birth, your time had to be in sync with the seasons. The baby cried on your back while you were still bent over, tying sheaves of rice. Milk leaked out, mixing with your sweat, soaking into your clothes. You had no other choice, because the season waited for no one. You realized that time was also a ravager of the body. Just yesterday, you were a shy girl before her wedding. Now your face was sunburnt, your hands calloused. Wrinkles were etched into the corners of your eyes early on. You didn't need a mirror to know. In the Middle Ages, 30 was already old. People didn't live to dream of being 40 or 50. Time was cruel, short, and death was always lurking at the door. The church not only rang the bell, but also divided your life with its festivals, its holy days, its seasons of fasting. On those days, you fasted, you prayed, or you participated in rituals. Time never flowed naturally. It was always sandwiched between religious laws. Every time a major festival came, the village was lively, but you knew it was just a way for people to mark. Another year has passed, another season is over. Your time was not like a man's. They measured it by the harvest, while you measured it by your menstrual cycles, your pregnancies, your childbirths, your breastfeeding. Each cycle of your body was a separate clock, ticking steadily, sometimes more harshly than the church bell. For a woman, time was a burden, not a power. In the village, death was not a surprise. People died of sickness, of hunger, of the winter, of falling into the river. You knew that the invisible clock of your life would stop sooner than you wanted. What scared you was not death, but time passing without a single moment that truly belonged to you. You sat by the fire, listening to the wood crackle, thinking about the never-ending cycle of the sun, the seasons, your body. You understood that you were just a speck of dust in the giant gears of medieval time, swept away, never to escape. From the moment you sat trembling on your wedding night, to the days after childbirth, the hungry winters, and the church bells ringing in your ears, you have lived through the short but arduous life of a medieval woman. Each chapter of this journey is not a separate story, but a piece of the entire social picture. There, marriage was not just the union of two people, but a community contract. The wedding night became a spectacle for the whole village, where whispers were heavier than the fear in the bride's heart. Wife, mother, daughter-in-law, 3 layers of pressure piled on one woman. You did not choose your roles. You only wore them like a heavy cloak. Your mother-in-law was the figure of power in the house. The church was the figure of power in the village. And your husband was the one who both shared and held the head of the table. You, in the middle, were both invisible and stared at. The challenges in the kitchen, in the fields, in the bed, or in the cold winter, all reminded you that women had no private space to breathe. When you held the hard black bread or the pot of thin porridge, you understood that hunger was not just in your stomach. It was in the community's mindset and memory. People recounted the famine years as if telling a dark legend, and you understood. You were just a new link in that chain of legends. Food, for medieval people, was never just food. It was a measure of life, a symbol of justice or injustice, evidence of your social status. No one saw time, but everyone heard it. The church bell, the rooster's crow, the hurried footsteps to the fields. It reminded you that you had nothing but a repetitive cycle. If men measured time by the harvest, women measured it by their menstrual blood, their pregnancies, their childbirths, their breastfeeding. The body became a clock, and every beat reminded you that life was short, fragile, and predetermined. In the village, nothing escaped the eyes and ears of others. People whispered, judged, and created unwritten laws stronger than any decree. You did not live for yourself, but in the eyes of others. Your wedding night, your postpartum belly, the bowl of porridge in your hand, all were scrutinized. It both made you feel small and imprisoned you in an invisible cage. From this journey, there are things that the listener today can take away as lessons. The fragility of the human condition. No matter the era, what keeps us alive is still food, warmth, and the embrace of the community. The price of existence. Not everyone has the right to choose their life, but everyone must pay the price for existing, with sweat, with endurance, with their own bodies. The power and limitations of community. The village both protected and imprisoned. The collective maintained order, but also suffocated individual freedom. Religion and faith. In the darkness of hunger, faith was a flame. But faith was also a shackle, forcing the soul to follow a framework. The meaning of collective memory. The story of a medieval wife is not just a private story, but a symbol for the millions of women who lived, endured, and loved in the darkness of history. You close your eyes, smelling the kitchen smoke, the sweat, the damp earth. You hear the distant bell, the crying of children, the whispers at the well. All these sounds create a strange lullaby, heavy yet peaceful, making you understand, yet lulling you to sleep. This story is not meant to frighten you, but to make you empathetic and grateful. Grateful that life today is more open, and empathetic for the fates that once lived, suffered, loved, and gave birth in the medieval darkness. Tonight, as you slowly drift off to sleep, remember that you are not alone. Before you, there were countless generations who lived in darkness, but still held on to a small light, the light of resilience. And it is that light that connects the past to the present, from the cold medieval bed to your warm bed today. Let this story be a good night wish from history, whispering that even if time is cruel, hunger is all around, and the community is harsh, within every person there is a smoldering ember, the ember of life.